This is the lecture for Bhikkhu Parekh's Redistribution or Recognition, a Misguided Debate. So just one topic on page 211. He says, since different groups hold different views on almost all aspects of justice, and since we're prone to universalizing ones that appear self-evident to us, a theory of justice can only be based on a consensus developed through a democratic dialogue between different points of view. So, that maybe sounds familiar because for one reason or another, a bunch of like deliberative democracy stuff has sort of surfaced in this class. So we saw it first most clearly with Anderson, where she's sort of explicitly defending a deliberative democratic kind of view. And then, it kind of came up back in Young, and now it's here finally in Parekh. And so a few things about this. First, it's worth thinking about like what is the relationship between identity politics, which is our topic in this unit, and deliberative democracy? Is it an accident that Young, who is kind of in favor of a form of identity politics, and Parekh, who is also in favor of a form of identity politics, is it just an accident that both of them kind of have deliberative democratic views too? Or is there some kind of link between deliberative democracy and identity politics? Maybe they go together in some way. What might Anderson think about identity politics? She didn't really talk about it, but I don't know. So that's something to think about. And then similarly, this came up in the Young lecture, and now it's coming up here again. This idea of objectivity. So he says, uh, look, we're prone to universalizing our views of justice. We need a consensus developed between different points of view. Young said something similar like this, and that was how she wanted to understand objectivity. Parekh doesn't go as far as calling this objectivity, and he might not even think we should call this objectivity. And in fact, it was weird that Young called it objectivity back when she talked about it, because if you get a bunch of people together to talk about something, it's not clear that gets you sort of objectivity, whatever that means. We haven't, I mean, I'm recording this lecture before we've talked about this stuff, so maybe we have talked about it. We haven't really talked about like what do the words objectivity and subjectivity mean, but like broadly speaking, the way we usually use these words in philosophy, objectivity is the idea that, there's a single right answer to some sort of question, an objective right answer to the question. And that answer, since there's just one right answer, it doesn't change depending on like who you ask. So, when I try to figure out the answer, if I get it right, I'll get that right answer. And if I get it wrong, I'll get something else. If you try to figure out the right answer, you'll get that one right answer. If you get it wrong, if you get it right, if you get it wrong, you'll get. So like, if you get it right, you'll get the objective right answer. That's what objectivity means. And subjectivity usually means that there isn't a single right answer. Rather, the right answer it's subjective depending on sort of who's working out the answer. So if the answer to the question is subjective, then when I work it out, I might get one answer, and you work it out, and you get another answer. So for instance, here's a question that probably has an objective right answer. What shape is the Earth? If I work it out correctly and you work it out correctly, we're both going to get the same answer. It's round. Here's a question that has a subjective right answer. What's your favorite food? If I work it out correctly and you work it out correctly, probably we'll get different answers. I think mine is falafel, and yours is probably not falafel. And even if it is, it's just by accident. So when we think of objectivity, we think there's one right answer. When we think of subjectivity, we think there's multiple possible right answers. And subjectivity doesn't have to be limited to like the individual. There can be sort of intersubjective things. So, what is the right way to run a class? The right answer maybe depends on like the nature of the class. So depending on who's enrolled in the class, maybe I should run it one way as opposed to another. It's not like there's one right answer. There's not like the best way to run a class. It depends on what my students are like. But it's also not as if the answer just depends on like individual people. Like it doesn't just depend on me or on you or something. It depends on the class together. And so this sort of intersubjective view, that, I don't know, that sounds like what Young was talking about when she says we have to have this sort of deliberative democratic thing to work out how it works. That doesn't sound objective, at least to me. It sounds intersubjective. Anderson, remember, didn't really use the language of objectivity or subjectivity. She thinks like different societies have to work out their sort of answers. That is a kind of intersubjective kind of thing, but like I mentioned in the Young lecture, there is an objective right answer for Anderson, which is it's objectively true that each society has to work out stuff for themselves. So like the objective answer is figure it out yourself, and then that sort of gets you subjective stuff. And so like notice like the objective and subjective, I don't know, maybe they sort of mix together in these sorts of ways. So whatever. Parekh, again, he's not using the objective subjective language. And if you asked him, maybe he'd say, yeah, fine, it's a sort of subjective thing. You know, you have to have a conversation in the society and different points of view. And so, you know, it can be subjective. But maybe not. Maybe he wants to think this is an objective sort of thing, and it's just a matter of how you get to it through conversation, which is kind of what Sen had in mind, basically. Sen wasn't really endorsing like a literal conversation, but like he had something along these lines, but he still kind of had a kind of objective view of justice in a way. It wasn't like sort of just up to each society to figure these things out, maybe. So that's just to, you know, say some more words about objectivity and subjectivity, and also since we're talking about it, deliberative democracy, like this was one of the topics we could vote on that did not win. So you know, we're getting more deliberative democracy than you might have wanted in the class, but I don't know, like maybe there's a reason that these identity politics topics seem to involve deliberative democracy, and so that's what I sort of suggested you think about at the beginning of the lecture. And you know, I don't know, come to your own conclusion.